Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I am extremely honored to welcome today in Bucharest my very good friend and colleague, Minister Sesiune, to our annual meeting. We open our debates with this panel dedicated to our eastern neighborhood, given the importance we attach, both of us, to developments in the region. The illegal annexation of Crimea, that we continue to strongly condemn, overturned the decades of dialogue and cooperation in Europe after the World War II. Recent events in Ukraine, in addition to the persistence of the frozen conflicts in our eastern neighborhood, confront us with key challenges. The resurgence of old-style divisions between East and West, a deepened lack of trust in the idea of a Europe whole, free and at peace, and in Russia's relations with NATO and the EU. This in turn requires concerted action of the whole democratic community, and our response should be strengthening all existing commitments and their implementation, so that comprehensive security is ensured in Europe, including in our region. Romania and Poland have high stakes in the current dynamic context and an important contribution to make. We share a deep concern over the deterioration of the security situation in Ukraine, which could additionally impact on both our securities. Therefore, we remain committed advocates for a peaceful solution to the Ukrainian crisis. At European level, the European Neighbourhood Policy Review can bring added value for promoting transformation and democratization, as well as socio-economic development. Regarding the Eastern Partnership, Romania has always advocated for a more ambitious European approach. In our assessment over the next period, we need to focus on the implementation of the association agreements and DCFTA in the Republic of Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. But at the same time, we need to remind ourselves that these are not the final goals of the political association and economic integration. We continue to believe that offering incentives over the next period of time, including a clear European path to the EU ambitious partners who have proved the political will and capacity to honor their commitments, remains the most effective way to stimulate the implementation of reforms. We need to work together, Romania and Poland, beyond the conclusions and results of the Riga summit, to inject more vision, concepts, instruments to the Eastern Partnership. And I think the context of the revision of the European Neighbourhood Policy is the right occasion for this. Developing EU strategic communication, proactive and tailored regional and national specificities is a must as to present the genuine advantages of cooperation with the EU. Ladies and gentlemen, I am particularly honored to welcome as the special guest of this panel my colleague, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, Grzegorz Schetyna. He has a remarkable political career in which he served in important positions like Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the Interior and Administration, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Polish Sejm, and Marshal of the Sejm of the Republic of Poland, before taking over as head of the Polish diplomacy. Poland is one of our closest friends within the European Union and a traditional ally within NATO, with whom we share a strong strategic partnership. The high-level dialogue between our countries has particularly intensified since the beginning of this year, illustrated by the visit paid by our President in March, followed by the consultations I had in Warsaw in April, or the joint visit we paid to Montenegro. Thank you so much, Grzegorz, for joining this in order to support the NATO accession. It is a great moment of our bilateral relation, and I'm sure we will have an even closer political, economic, and military cooperation in the future. We have achieved a deep coordination, especially in security areas. We have an excellent cooperation within NATO, and we have brought to life various initiatives. The regional summit to be held in November in Romania, a follow-up to the similar meeting hosted by you last year. The round of consultations on security at the level of security policy directors from the flank allies, and the trilateral cooperation with Turkey. All these are very important from a strategic perspective. We have important projects to achieve by the end of this year. The strategic dialogue at the level of ministers of foreign affairs and defense, the trilateral at the level of foreign ministers with Turkey, the one at the same level with Ukraine and the quadrilateral of the foreign ministers with Ukraine and Republic of Moldova. So against this background, I am confident that we can achieve even more. And I'm also confident that the NATO summit in Poland next year will be extremely successful. And I strongly believe that Romania and Poland could be indeed the driving force for the region between the Baltic and the Black Sea, projecting security and stability in our eastern neighborhood. Dear Grzegorz, thanks a lot for your friendship and for the strong signal you give today with your presence at this meeting of the Romanian diplomats. I'm looking forward to hear your views, and I invite you to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Bogdan. Dear Minister Bogdan, dear Ambassador, Excellencies. That's true what Bogdan said about our cooperation, about perfect relations between Romania and Poland. But we should talk in these days, with this beginning of the new political season, about the problems, about the issues, about the future, and about the challenges which we should talk about it. First of all, Bogdan, I would like to thank you for the invitation and the chance to address the community of Romanian ambassadors. Such annual ambassadors' conference are good occasions to arrange, brainstorm, and reflect on the foreign policy challenges in the months to come. We have the same conferences year by year in July, and it's always very interesting just to chance to talk, to describe the problems, and to resume the last months of our diplomacy activity. So I'm truly honored to provide Polish insights into your debate about the Romanian foreign policy. So, as you mentioned, about Poland and Romania are strategic partners, and we are proud of these really excellent relations between us. We have held high-level meetings on a regular basis, not because the calendar just requires so, but because Bucharest and Warsaw have a true community of interests. First, our joint aim is to strengthen security of our region. It's the base. By strengthening the transatlantic bond, NATO's eastern flank, and its defense capabilities, and all our activity in this area, in this field, it's crucial. Second, we believe in a strong European Union, able to promote an efficient foreign and security policy and acting as an important international player. Third, we share common values and interests in the EU policies, including the Eastern policy, climate, energy, and debate on infrastructure, in particular transport corridors. Fourth, we value democracy and human rights and the principles of international law. State sovereignty, territorial integrity, and security of borders are our Romanian and Polish principles for international order. Today it's good to have friends who share such views on the international order. We need them now more than ever before. The geopolitical situation around Europe has changed dramatically. We know about it and we feel it. The EU operates today in its neighborhood in a lot more complex environment than 10 years ago, when EU neighborhood policy was launched in these days. In the East, we now witness violent Russian aggression on Ukraine, pressure on Moldova and Georgia, unsolved, frozen conflicts in the whole eastern region. In the South, we are challenged by violent conflicts, terrorist threats, illegal migration, especially in last days we can watch this in this dramatic sense, and humanitarian crisis. To name only a few examples: a bloody civil war in Syria, state failure in Libya, little democratic progress in Egypt. The challenges then the EU faces are so great that down-to-earth realism must now guide us. If the EU wants to be a strong political player, but we believe that it won't, and security provider in its own neighborhood, we must rethink its priorities and the instruments we should use. We must translate our ambitions into a new strategic vision of the EU external action. A part of this process should be the ongoing reform of the European neighborhood policy. Commissioner Hahn and High Representative Federica Mogherini are working on it, so our ideas and assessments are needed more than ever. We must first realistically assess our interests and assets. For too long, we have taken the success of EU's normative power for granted. We disregarded other forces, pulling our neighbors in different directions. To give you our one example, we clearly overlooked the Russian agenda and its willingness to use force. It's the time to stop thinking that our neighborhood is homogeneous. We cannot ignore difference between our partners, their aspirations, interests in reforms, stability of state structures, geopolitical environment, and importance for the EU. Instead of a single neighborhood policy, we need multiple and variable policies under the concept or idea of European neighborhood policy. Those who seek closer ties with the EU and are ready to implement association agreements should get stronger political, and technical, and financial support. When providing this support, we must remember that long-term benefits of our neighbors' approximation with the EU require costs. These costs have to be borne as big as they may be, and they cannot overshadow future benefits. This applies equally of the South and the East, the Tunisia as well as the three Eastern partners that have recently launched implementation of association agreement. For countries with limited interest in the EU offer, we need more interest-driven forms of engagement. We should develop specific, practical forms of democracy building. Our support might be most effective in, for sure, first, civil society, then people-to-people contacts, local development, small and medium enterprises, professional exchanges. We need to focus on sectors relevant to build the EU on the neighbors, such as security, energy, and combating illegal immigration. Facing an art of instability along the EU borders, we should invest in helping our neighbors address internal and external security threats. Emphasis should be put on reforms on the security sector. We know, both of our countries know about it. Redefinition of our policies should go hand in hand with the improvement of their effectiveness. Neighborhood policy cannot be a bureaucratic behemoth. EU needs to be swift and flexible to respond rapidly to a changing situation. This requires simplifying programming of EU assistance and making it more responsive to the situation. The challenge lies with an accurate political diagnosis of the neighborhood situation and also with an assessment of strengths and weaknesses in the EU's current approach. Excellencies, Poland and Romania share a similar quite similar geographic location, national security priorities, and historical experiences. For these reasons, we are destined to develop the EU's policy in the European Eastern neighborhood. Towards that end, we should involve other like-minded EU countries to better coordinate our common efforts. Some member states have been trying to divert the EU's attention from the East. Staying attentive about their arguments, we still need a strong group of EU member states advocating for the Eastern Partnership. It is true, in the South, the EU does face serious challenges, especially in last weeks and months, such as rise of Daesh, erosion of state structures, and increasingly sectarian politics. But we should make it very clear that problems in the Eastern Partnership countries, and especially in Ukraine, should not be underestimated or left unanswered. It is our role to keep reminding our partners in Europe, in the whole of Europe, in the United European Union, that both the Eastern and Southern dimension of our neighborhood policy are equally important. We know about it in Bucharest, in Warsaw, but it's not the common knowledge of whole European countries. So we should talk and repeat about it. Eastern Partnership is only 6 years old, but it has already produced results. Association agreements have already been signed with 3 partner states. Visa liberalization process is moving forward. Eastern Partnership triggered major political and economic reforms in the post-Soviet area. So we have to build on what was already been achieved. We have to make sure that advanced reforms do not slow down due to internal negligence, feeling of a reform fatigue, or Moscow's pressure. The Riga summit reconfirmed the importance of the Eastern Partnership. The new geopolitical environment requires changes to adapt the policy to reality on the ground. Yet, it must not attempt the EU to abandon this initiative. Its main goal is to complete the democratic transformation in countries which started implementing the association agreements. Now we should together work out the post-Riga agenda, our activity after Riga summit, which could propose attractive ways of cooperation for all partners, so that Eastern Partnership will remain inclusive for all of them. First of all, we should keep the Eastern Partnership as the crucial element of EU neighborhood policy. Its fate, success or failure, is crucial for our Eastern neighbors and, or most of all, for the Union itself. It is about the European credibility as a global player, its capability to stabilize the situation and its own neighborhood, and to project democratic changes and economic prosperity beyond the borders. Second, we should keep pressure on Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia to deliver on the reforms. Implementation of association agreements, fight against corruption, decentralization. Of course, we should help them in this process, but let us be frank here. If the partners' governments need to seriously implement difficult and sometimes costly reforms, otherwise they will not live up to expectations of their own societies, and they will not build modern, democratic, and independent states. The coming years will be decisive for the success of reforms in Ukraine, in Moldova, and in Georgia. So we should be ready to increase our support for those who really implement ambitious reforms. Third, we should not neglect relations with our less ambitious partners, like Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. The EU should present positive, tailor-made offers and initiatives, taking into account its own and partners' interests and ambitions, and not forgetting the broader geopolitical environment. Fourth, we really should focus on the visa liberalization program and as a whole process. Moldova is a success story. Now it's time for Ukrainians and Georgians about this process to be able to travel into EU without visas. It's a symbol of openness and symbol of the chance. This will require a lot of effort, especially in the case of Ukraine that is fighting against the Russian aggressions. Our countries should continue pushing in Brussels for further progress in visa liberalization, especially with Ukraine. And last but not least, we should reflect on how to develop Eastern Partnership for the countries that already have association agreements in place. Can we offer them more? It's a question. We should start a serious discussion. I count on cooperation with Romania, with Bogdan, with the Romanian policy in developing the Eastern Partnership further. Let me now focus briefly on the one particular thing or particular issue, Moldova, especially important part of discussion in Bucharest. We are concerned that with the internal situation in the country. Its European integration seems to have run out of steam. Corruption scandals made Moldovans lose enthusiasm towards the EU integration. Without progress in implementing reforms, Moldova will lose credibility with its own people and with international community. And that would be such good news for Moscow, which tried to drive Chisinau away from the European integration path, agenda, and to draw it into the Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union. Unfortunately, Moldovan reforms process has been neglected, despite the pro-European declaration of authorities in Chisinau. It is a bad sign, as Moldova was a front-runner among Eastern Partnership countries, an example for other EU partners. It will be difficult to have the crisis resolved in the next few months. Much depends on its government's ambition and actions. At this point, I see no other way but to put more political pressure on the Moldovan government. With special relations between Bucharest and Chisinau, there is a major role for your government to play. There can be no voice heard better in Moldova than yours, Romanian voice. Ladies and gentlemen, let me finish by saying again how significant the bilateral Polish-Romanian strategic partnership is. It has proved its importance in those last difficult years. Together we can do more, we know about it, and we tried to arrange such situation with Bogdan on the all level our cooperation in Europe. Together we can do more, especially in developing the new European neighborhood policy and, as I mentioned, about Eastern Partnership. What we do now in these difficult times will change the EU Eastern neighborhood for generations to come. We cannot fail. Let us make our joint, lasting contribution to the European big, huge great European project. I look forward to our exchange today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.